from my earliest memories, 3, 4 years old, it wasn't just my psychic abilities, but I could see dead people. I woke up at 4:45 in the morning, paralyzed completely on the right side, blind on the right side, and I had had a massive stroke. And because I didn't wake up, it caused a second stroke. So I'm actually missing all of this part of my brain and most of this part of my brain. Luckily, on the other side, they told me, this is what would happen if you died. This is what would happen if you go back. I had a true, like, soul level knowing that we all planned this.
Amber, it's a pleasure having you on. I'm so excited to talk to you. Ever since we set this up, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I know each of us have had different experiences in our past, but there seems to be a lot of overlap in different areas. And
Uh,
the first question that comes to my mind is, have you always been aware of your psychic abilities?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm super grateful. Um, and yes, I always say I was born different. I don't know another way to sort of explain it, but from my earliest memory, I knew it was almost like I didn't feel like I fit being a kid. And it just didn't make sense to me to be a kid. And I didn't like properly, I don't know, socialize, and I had different expectations than the average kid. But from my earliest memories, 3, 4 years old, it wasn't just my psychic abilities, but I could see dead people. But I didn't know they were dead. They weren't scary. It wasn't like TV where, like, if they died in a car accident, they looked really scary. It was more, I just thought most of the adults around me ignored certain people because they would walk right by them or wouldn't say hi to them or, wouldn't acknowledge their presence. I didn't know until I was probably maybe 6 or 7-ish that they actually couldn't see them. Um, and with my psychic abilities, I didn't necessarily understand how it worked when I was young. And a lot of my psychic sort of gifts came through in my dreams until I kind of learned about it. And so I would have these horrible dreams about plane crashes and all sorts of awful things, bear attacks. And I would just think it was a nightmare. And then, like a week later, 10 days later, a month later, I would see on the news or hear somebody talking about the dream that I had. And then because I was young, I thought it was my fault. I thought I was causing it. Um, and it took me a long time to realize it actually wasn't me.
Wow. So you were having premonitions or precognition of events that were happening in the future.
Yeah.
Now, with these events, were you in any way attached to them, or did it just feel like something random that was coming in? Like it was just the kind of the luck of the draw as to what you were experiencing and what your precognitions were.
It was more kind of like I was watching a movie. Like I didn't get like fully immersed into it. So I wouldn't necessarily be on the plane. Once in a while, like I do remember like a bear attack thing. It was me. Like I was experiencing it, but it was more like I didn't feel like necessarily it was real life for me. It was just like a horrible sort of nightmare. Whereas the dead people, they didn't scare me. They didn't try to get me to do anything like they do now. I just didn't know how to set boundaries. And so now I have really good boundaries. It's taken a lot of years. And so they don't bug me. They're not hounding me or anything like that. And I can filter out my sort of psychic visions or gifts unless it's something I can change. So, for an example, my dad is in his 80s and he was and my mom were going somewhere to a different town, and I just had this like thing that I had to tell him, make sure you are not walking up a sidewalk step because you're going to fall and break your hip. So if you are going to go on a sidewalk, go to where there's the like wheelchair ramp. And he's pretty steady on his feet. He was still working at the time. And so if I can prevent something, then I do get that push. But if I can't change it, prevent it, or stop it, I have really good boundaries.
And now that you've gotten to a point where you're able to manage your psychic abilities to a certain degree or have boundaries around your energy and the energies that you're experiencing and interacting with around you, what does that look like? What is your current practice like? How do you utilize your skills and abilities in a way that is beneficial? Because I have based on the fact that you wrote a book about your experience in your life and some of the experiences that you've had. I'd love to talk about that, but I get a strong sense that you come from a place of wanting to share and wanting to serve. So how are these gifts being utilized now to achieve that?
So I call it my light switch. So if I'm going about my regular day, I try to have my gifts mainly turned off. Since I had 3 years ago a stroke and an NDE, some of them I don't feel the need to turn off like I did before. So my really strong empathic gifts I tend to leave on because it just makes my life easier and kind of entertaining. It's kind of fun. But like my mediumship and psychic gifts and stuff, it's a light switch. When I am not working and I want to be present with my kids and my husband, I am not participating in the other side. But I do try, like if I go 3 or 4 days or more not tuning in, I start to get super grumpy and just feeling just kind of off because I'm not sort of honoring my purpose, I guess, or what I'm here for. So I do private readings and groups, healings. I've just started doing that again. I teach classes, but I do a ton of live videos for free online just to answer people's questions and do what I call mood control. So I have this sort of unique ability to sit with my guides and allow them to just sort of like flow through me, but filter and cleanse people's energy so that they can feel calm and just get a break a little bit from the human sort of chaos that surrounds us. And so I know a lot of people tell me like they put, you know how some people watch their comfort show if they're anxious and can't sleep? People put my videos on because I can mood control, but also apparently my voice is calming, which is funny because I used to be made fun of for my voice when I was young, but it's fine now, I guess. But yeah, so I do a lot, but I make sure that I'm also caring for myself first. And I think a lot of humans miss that part, when you're born with these gifts or you feel like you have these obligations to sort of the collective consciousness. We tend to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good, which is unhealthy for us, but also can make us a little resentful. And so I try to maintain a balance. I don't always. Sometimes, I am human, and so I have moments, but I do try to maintain a balance between work or spiritual work and my actual physical life.
Yeah, I love that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And my sense is that a lot of people who are empathic and who have maybe latent psychic abilities or abilities or senses that they're not super in touch with,
Yeah.
that their default is to not take the time, and maybe they don't even have the skills and they don't really recognize
Yeah.
that they are putting out so much energy, or that it takes so much energy just to maintain, to keep everything, in regards to their psychic abilities, to keep everything under wraps and to keep
Yeah.
everything under control to the degree that which they can then live their life in a meaningful way and have a normal life. And it's really inspiring and awesome to hear that you found a way and that you've been able to, through developing your abilities, to kind of toggle them on and off and turn the switch off, as you say.
It took a long time, like a long time. When I was young, I learned around 13 that any type of substance actually would turn it off, or help me ignore it. And so I had like a year and a half where and I live in Canada, so it's a little bit better, but I smoked a lot of pot because it turned it off. Um, and then because I had no idea why I was struggling so much, what was wrong with me, why was I so different? In my mind, I had kind of a spiritual awakening at like 15 or 16 when my family moved to Mexico to open a restaurant. And at the time, I was not doing good things. I had dropped out of school. I, again, was smoking pot a lot, which you can't do in Mexico. So I'd sort of stopped, but I was just going on the wrong path. And I had this, like, I was awake, but I had this like vision where I had two paths ahead of me. One was like all my friends, all the things I'd been doing, and the other was just light. I couldn't see anybody. I didn't know what was there, but I just felt this strong draw to go that way. And I chose that way. But my 15, 16-year-old mind, like, sort of equated it to light means religion, right? Wouldn't you think, right? In the 90s, light meant religion or God or whatever. And so I came back and I wasn't raised religious, but I thought that that's what that meant. And so I started, I called it shopping for churches because I didn't really know religion that well. And so, as a 15-year-old, I'm now going, I think I went to like 10 different churches looking for something that spoke to me or felt like that vision. And I did choose one. Um, and it did help me to feel a little bit more normal because in their minds, what I was feeling and doing was a sin. I kind of was able to use that as a light switch. Wasn't super healthy, but it helped me get through, the next decade. Um, and it took me a long time to realize, that light wasn't actually, at least for me, religion. It was spiritual. But I think, when you're that young, you have no idea what's going on, why you're different. Church felt right, until they kind of kicked me out for having gifts once I accepted them, um, in a loving way, but still, it's not necessarily like shone upon for people like me in churches. Um, but yeah, I think each person's journey is kind of different, and I'm sure not many look like me because we're all individual, but I was always searching, and I couldn't figure out why I felt like I wasn't getting the answers until I accepted my gifts, and I didn't accept them until I was, wanna say, around 35? In 2015. I'm really bad at math now with the brain injury, so that's 10 years ago, and right now I'm 43, so, or maybe I'm 44. I don't know. But yeah, so I've only been sort of living this life for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know, and something that you said struck me in that when you're not connecting with spirit or utilizing your spiritual gifts, or if you have the light switch turned off for more than several days, that it can affect your mood and it can affect your flow and your experience of life. And I wonder how many people just out there in the world are in a place where they don't recognize, they don't know what's going on. They just know that
Yeah.
something's not right. And if the reason for that is what you just mentioned there, yet they're not aware of it.
Yeah.
In your experience, is that something that you see or something you perceive?
Yes, all the time. And it goes a couple of ways. So it can affect your mental health and or your physical body. I always sort of, and anybody who is sort of gifted or spiritual probably has done this but not realized. But I would look in the mirror and look at my eyes, and I would automatically, when I was young, go, "This is so weird that this is me, and I have this physical body." Like, it doesn't. When I was looking at myself, it was almost like I was disassociated, kind of, and I would just sit there going, "It's so strange that I'm in this human." I would do this at 8, 9 years old. Like, it's so weird that I'm in this human body. I don't. It feels strange, but then that would pass. But the whole time before I accepted my gifts, my physical body suffered more than my mental health. I was very, very stubborn, and I always worried people would think I was crazy if I ever told them anything. But because I was so stubborn, my physical body really crapped the bed. I had probably close to 10 surgeries for issues in my gut, my reproductive area. I had very low iron. I was so anemic. I was sick all the time. I would even, like, as an early teen, get strange infections that kids shouldn't get, like shingles, which is like a very stress induced type thing if you've had chickenpox before, but like really strange. And the doctors would always say, like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you're the 1% that has this complication. And it's because my body was having to carry the brunt of me living in complete denial and like denying sort of my purpose here.
Something you said there, I spent a lot of time facilitating plant medicine ceremonies, many ceremonies for a number of years. And one thing I would notice when somebody would come in with a GI issue, for me, it was like a red flag or like an indicator, because that's something that I went through dealing with Crohn's disease for several years. Finally, I came to the realization that for myself initially, and then I started noticing it in other people, if there's chronic inflammation in the gut, it usually means they're not following their gut.
Yeah.
The people who tended to have chronic GI inflammation were people who really wanted to be doing something with their life, but they weren't.
Yeah.
They were ignoring that, their intuition, that inner calling.
Yeah.
Somebody who wanted to be a singer, but they were working as a as a barista at a coffee store, or somebody who wanted to be, they just weren't often following their inner guidance.
Yeah.
And that incongruency led to inflammation in the gut because they weren't following it. And that was something that I experienced personally. It took me many years to come to that understanding, but now I kind of key in on that. If I hear somebody talking about GI inflammation, I start asking questions around, like, so what do you do for work? Like, is that in alignment? Do you really want to be doing that? And I don't straight up say it often, but I ask questions and get them thinking, like, is what I'm doing really in alignment with my purpose, what I feel like I'm here for? And I'm curious, do you feel like now you are in alignment with your purpose, like what you're here to do?
100%. Yeah. And I don't have any of those health issues anymore. I did have a massive stroke, and that was after I accepted my gifts. But that was a learning experience I chose before I came here. And I don't think I could have avoided it, even if whether or not I accepted my gifts. But I'm a lot more blunt, I think, than you, because I actually do say, what's up? Like, you're having all these health issues. Have you set boundaries? Because it can be not living your purpose, but it also can be overdoing it. So, maybe you're super excited to be now on this new path that you never stop and you never shut it down. You never take like sort of the time to cleanse your energy and let go of all the stuff that you're doing, or the people you're working with, not letting that go. I always say, like, when I leave this room or any sort of work space, I leave it all there. So when I have a reading with somebody, when I get up and walk out this door, I don't remember them, their face, or anything we talked about, because I can't separate the two and I can't carry that with me. That's a lot of the reason I was sick all the time, was because I was taking everybody's pain and processing it as my own. I also was very angry as a kid. Everybody always joked because my parents would put us three girls in matching outfits and they would take a picture, and I would be like scowling at the camera because I just felt
Not
angry.
Cool, Mom.
Yeah. I was angry all the time because I didn't understand, like, nobody saw me and nobody could tell me why I felt so different. I get it now, and I'm not an angry person, other than sometimes at myself if I'm not listening to myself. But yeah, I think trying to figure out, and that doesn't mean there aren't actual just medical issues, and some people are going to go through them, whether or not they're like living their purpose and stuff like that. But I can kind of see, especially when people are on a spiritual path, like, okay, like, have you done X, Y, Z? Because I don't think you have, because you're not feeling super great. And not always just physical. Again, it can be mental health. Usually it's one or the other. And once in a while, it's both.
So you mentioned your the stroke that you had a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, and maybe what things were like leading up to it, and how that experience changed your life and your trajectory. I know you said you started the spiritual path, or this way of being, about 10 years ago, and the stroke was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So for me, in my experience, my spiritual journey started with an NDE.
Yeah.
And yours came after you began kind of walking down that path.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that experience
Yep.
and how that has impacted your life and how you now utilize that
Yep.
to help people moving forward.
Sure. People always say, like, what kind of psychic are you if you didn't know you were going to have a massive stroke? I didn't technically know, but I prepared for it, which is super strange. Like, it was leading up to Christmas because I had the stroke 2 days before Christmas in 2021. And usually, like, I cook, it was going to be my first huge meal. Usually, I cook for 40 people, all my family come over. But because it was COVID, that was the first year that I could do that. And normally I'm baking and freezing it and doing all that sort of stuff. But the 6 weeks before the stroke, for some reason, I felt the need to make freezer meals for my family. And my husband is like, what are you doing? Like, we need that space for the turkey and all the ham and all the baking. I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like I need to do this. And so I cooked 6 weeks of freezer meals right before the stroke, a couple of weeks before, so that when I did get out of the ICU and stuff, my husband, who has never done the homemaking, it's always been me, had food to feed our kids. So I didn't technically know, but somewhere I knew. But I think a good sort of warning just for everybody, if you ever have a headache that is the worst headache of your life and it's not something you get a lot, go get checked. I didn't. I had the most crazy headache of my life. We had decorated gingerbread houses that day, and I went to bed with this bad headache. And I don't remember, but apparently, like an hour later, I texted my husband and said, like, this really hurts. Can you bring me some Tylenol, Advil? And he did. And I went into unconsciousness, which meant I didn't wake up in time. You have a golden time where you can get treatment for a stroke. I think it's 3 to 4 hours, and then the treatment doesn't work. Well, because I fell asleep or into unconsciousness, we didn't totally know when I had the stroke. I woke up at 4:45 in the morning, paralyzed completely on the right side, blind on the right side, and I had had a massive stroke. And because I didn't wake up, it caused a second stroke. So I'm actually missing all of this part of my brain and most of this part of my brain. And people don't believe me when I say it, but my brain scans are online, and it shows the giant stroke. Anyways, long story short, there was a bunch of medical stuff. I was in bed alone. My husband fell asleep on the couch. I fell on the ground because I didn't know I was paralyzed and tried to crawl the door and I couldn't because you can't drag paralyzed weight. It's super hard. And I banged on the wall. He came in. He knew what was happening. He had first aid training. They got me to the hospital. They tried to treat it with the medication they normally give. It didn't work. There wasn't even a shadow of movement on the right side. Nothing changed. So they needed to life flight me to another hospital to do brain surgery. And so my family all got called in to say goodbye. They said I was dying and there's probably nothing they could do. And so even my kids, who were 12 and 14 at the time, had to come. And they let my husband fly with me because they didn't want me to die alone on Christmas. And so we took off, and the sun hit my face, and my husband tried to block it because I looked like I was getting hot, because when you're dying, you can get really, really hot. And I like looked uncomfortable and tried to hit him away because when the sun hit my face, I just had this wonderful feeling, and I opened my eyes and I was on the other side. I didn't have to go through a tunnel of light. Nobody had to call me. I was just there in this beautiful garden, surrounded in loved ones, my dogs, like crossed over dogs. Also, one of my dogs that was still alive. So that's kind of weird, but it made sense. 4 days after the stroke, she was 17 and a half. And when I was still in the hospital, she had to be put down. We had planned to put her down after Christmas, but she was on the other side because she had dementia and they can go kind of between places. And I was there to make a decision, and I had to decide whether or not I wanted to come back. It was not an easy decision. You'd think it would be, but they showed me what would happen if I lived and if I died. And it felt like I was there for 50 years. There was no pressure to make the decision. There was no like, come on, like you need to come on, you're going to like it. You got to do it or else you're going to be dead. there was, because time doesn't exist there. And so my guides were there and helped me decide. They didn't necessarily tell me what to do, but they just sort of showed me everything I needed to see to make the decision. Yeah. And I chose to come back.
How long after you came back and you come back into your body, you come back to this plane? Obviously, you're in a hospital. You just had a massive stroke. There's a whole lot of things that are happening around you that you didn't expect. Just boom, you're in the hospital, recovery, all this and that. How long did it take you to before you started talking about this experience, or was it right away? Did you start telling people right away, or did it take a little bit for you to kind of sit with it and integrate and kind of come to terms with it a little bit?
So I wasn't aware of anything for a bit. So I was on the other side while we flew, landed, and then I had a grand mal seizure because my brain was swelling so quickly. I made the decision to come back while the seizure was happening. As soon as I made the decision, I wasn't in the garden anymore. I don't know, just all of a sudden I wasn't. And then I was kind of floating above my body in this like light filled waiting room. So I was watching myself have the seizure. It did not look fun. The second the seizure was over, I was back in my body and not aware of anything. So it wasn't like I could hear people or anything. I only now know what people, like I've been told. So I had the seizure, um, and then I was unconscious for like that whole day. They brought me to the ICU. Um, they just decided not to do the brain surgery. They said I was too far gone. So no matter what, I probably would stay how I was, if not worse. And I probably either won't live or my husband would need to put me in a care home, start research, all that sort of stuff. They did give my husband the choice. We can do the brain surgery. More than likely that will kill her because I'd had that clot busting medication. My husband didn't know what to do. So he said to the neurosurgeon, like, what would you do if it was your wife? And he said, I wouldn't do it. So I didn't get the surgery. I was in the ICU, I think, for about 24 hours, and I didn't wake up at all. And then I was moved to the neuro ICU, and I woke up there. So the stroke was on the 23rd, like the night of the 22nd into the 23rd. I don't really remember most of anything until the 24th, 25th. And when I woke up, I was still completely paralyzed, um, blind, kind of, and I had complete aphasia. So I couldn't talk. I could say my sister's name and the F word, which is really nice. On Christmas Day, the neurosurgeon came and said, like she can't talk, but have you tried singing with her? Because the stroke was on the left side of my brain, singing and swearing is on the right. So we sang Christmas carols and I actually sang even though I couldn't. And so it took a couple of days before I could start to actually verbalize anything. And at first I kind of wanted to keep it to myself. I also didn't have a lot of words. So I think around like the 27th is when I kind of started talking about it. Um, and I was kind of on a high. I was on a high probably to the 29th or 30th, so quite a few days. And then I was not. And then everything felt horrible. And I was so angry and frustrated. I felt like such a burden. I didn't think I was ever going to get better. And I wanted, unfortunately, to die. I wanted to go back there. I would ask, like, plead with my guides, please just take me back. Like, my kids don't, I don't want to be taken care of forever. Like, I can't eat or talk or walk or reason. I feel like a child. And I was very childlike, very severe brain injuries. You do somewhat seem like a child at first. And I had to learn every single word on repetition. Like it was horrible. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Luckily, on the other side, they told me, like, this is what would happen if you died. This is what would happen if you go back. The first 6 months will be the worst time of your life. it will be harder than anything you've ever experienced. And I haven't had an easy life, being born, being able to see dead people, not great. And they said the next 12 months would be not as bad, but still horrible. You will wish you would have died. But then things will start happening and it will start to get better. And they were not lying. I was on so many medications because of the seizures. 30 to 70% of people, I think, after massive strokes develop seizure disorders. And so they try to keep your brain not as swollen to prevent it. And so I had that grand mal seizure, but then I continued to have them for a few hours, just smaller ones. And so I was on like horse level doses of anti-seizure medication. And they also, like my sleep center and hunger and thirst center was destroyed. I don't have it anymore. And so I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. So yes, I talked about the NDE, but I was also so angry. But I started actually talking about it online, still in the hospital. I was in the ICU, the neuro ICU, for 2 weeks. And I have live videos on my Facebook of me trying to talk about it, trying to find the words. But yeah, it took me a bit. Until I got off the seizure medications, my life was horrible and horribly uncomfortable. And I kept having complication after complication and more seizures and more issues and more strokes, little mini strokes. So I spent a lot of time in the hospital.
Something you said there, it really resonated with me in that you said that when you didn't want to come back. And I've had that experience myself. Specifically, the first time I did a very high dose of mushrooms,
Yeah.
it took me my consciousness so far from my body. It was quite an experience. I was like the furthest and most disconnected my consciousness had ever been from my body. And it was just like, okay, this is what it's like.
Yeah.
This is what, and it was just this almost this sense of deep remembering, like, oh yeah, this is normal. That's not normal. This is the real reality. And I was able to think of somebody and boom, I was there.
Yeah.
Think of somebody else, think of my aunt, boom, I was there. Think of somebody that I cared about, boom, I was there. And I could sense what was going on with them. And I could sense the things that they were hurting about. And it's like, wow, I feel like from this place, I can really help people.
Yeah.
People in my life whom, when I'm in my body, it's just much harder to. And in this state, I feel like I can do a lot more. I'm free. I can go wherever I want. I can really help people from this state.
Yeah.
And as I started coming back into my body, I realized what was happening. It's like, oh no, like, no, this. I started making these plans. Like, I'm going to help this person. I'm going to help that person. And I started coming into my body and I was realizing like, oh, okay, that's not going to work. And I started thinking, well, when you're in that state, when you've taken a really high dose of mushrooms, like your thinking is gets kind of squirrely. And it's like, okay, well, I have a problem here. I'm coming back into my body. How can I resolve this? Logically, the thing I'm going to have to do is jump off this cliff. And thankfully I sat with it. I thought it through. I was like, no, I'm supposed to be here for a reason. That's not what I'm supposed to do. Like, don't just, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't just ditch the body. Like, chill for a little bit and think this through. And thank goodness I did. But what you were saying there, it reminded me of that, like just being in that state and knowing that exists, having that experience of that is something, you can't put into words. It's just impossible to really articulate what that's like and what it's like to be in that state. So I connected with that. And I think on some level, on a really deep level, for a lot of people, we're missing that. And people are missing that. They may not be consciously aware of that longing or that, wanting to go back to that place. It's probably buried very deep in the unconscious. But so many people, especially individuals with psychic abilities or people who are more sensitive or empathic, people on a spiritual path, I think those type of people are more acutely aware that that exists, and maybe they've experienced it in meditation, or have had some sort of, maybe an NDE or
Yeah.
something that gave them a taste of it.
Yeah.
And once you have that experience, you can't put that back in the box.
Well,
Like
and
that's
you crave it.
yeah.
I craved it at first. Like, you know, my human life was so hard and so awful, and everybody I knew was hurting. And the looks of pity when people look at you and automatically assume you're never going to get better because the doctors were saying I was never going to get better. It was awful. And all I wanted was to feel like I could have stood in the grass on the other side, feeling the energy of everything around me, feeling like that vibration of pure love from whatever the highest energy is. I could have stood there for a millennia and never got bored. I went between the grass and the water like 50 times because it felt like everything made sense. And while I was there, I could see my family. I could see my kids madly packing the most random suitcase of things I would never wear. I could see my family panicking and everybody running to their houses to get ready to drive the hour and a half to the other hospital. I could see all of it. And I wasn't sad. I didn't feel bad for them. I had a true, like, soul level knowing that we all planned this, so it wasn't just me having the stroke. My kids planned a mom that was going to have a stroke, like everything made sense there. And then I came back to my body and it was like, well, this sucks. I didn't sign up for this. It looked all rainbows and unicorns on the other side. It's horrible. And again, I had a few things against me. The one, seizure medication, unfortunately, one of the side effects, and I don't know if you can even put this on here because sometimes it gets censored, but the one side effect that was awful was ideation, like unaliving yourself. Um, and I felt that. And so, I'm upfront about mental health. Before I accepted my gift, my background was in mental health and social work. And so I went to my doctor and said, hey, like, this isn't normal. I've never felt like this, but it's a very strong feeling. And he said, yes, that's a side effect of the medication. It happens sometimes. We'll try to put you on another one. But for seizure medications, you can't start lowering your dose until you're at a full dose of another one. So they tried introducing a new horrible seizure medication and started bringing me up, and it made everything worse, and I ended up in the hospital because I was so sick. So I had that against me, as well as, like, I'm having to do rehab for 10 weeks or whatever it was. And I got COVID and it almost killed me, and I ended up back in the like, it was like one after another. Then after COVID, my, like, soul dog died of cancer. He was diagnosed one day, died the next day. And then, like, 2 weeks later, I developed COVID pneumonia, which I had gotten. I always say it was like a bad country song. It's like everything that could have happened in that first 6 months. I don't know that there's any other time in my life where I didn't want to be human as much as then. Like, I just felt like all the suffering in the world for everybody I loved revolved around me, and everybody's lives were so awful. And I blamed myself. And, so I was still doing live videos for everybody, talking about my progress, but I also talked about the horrible part of it. And, I have this spiritual purpose, but sometimes being human overrides that. And sometimes it's awful. And it doesn't matter how wonderful your life is or how blessed you are or, oh my gosh, you're gifted and all that sort of stuff. I'm still human and had my toddler temper tantrum moments where I didn't want to be. And there's a reason we forget the other side. Usually between the ages of 3 to 5, we forget it, because if we remember it, we will not stay here. And, I actually won't channel around children, young children, because of that. Somebody booked for a reading and she showed up and she had a newborn baby with her. And I'm like, sorry, but no, like, if that little one feels the other side from me, I don't want to take responsibility. What if they die of SIDS that night because they had a little taste of, that's actually our home? we need to forget it in order to live in this life, because this life is hard. And sometimes I was kind of angry that I fully re-remembered everything and experienced it, because it made me want to be there. I don't feel like that anymore. I'm firmly here. I still look on it with fondness, and like when I need any type of like cleansing moment, I picture the grass and I picture the energy, but I'm firmly planted here again.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that's an incredible story and something that's very personal to you. So I appreciate you for being open and honest and sharing the details. And I didn't know that you were continuing to do Facebook Lives and
Yeah.
you kind of mapping the progress or sharing your story as you were going through the healing process.
Yeah.
Now that it's 3 years past that point, 3 years and a little change in a few months, do you feel like you've completed the healing process around that, or is it a lifelong thing that you're going to? Well, I understand that there are aspects of it that are lifelong, but do you feel like you've come to a certain point of completion with the healing process around that?
I don't know. I would like to think so, but I think I would be lying to myself. I think it's still kind of a daily, sometimes hourly struggle to feel like I fit here. I also have issues with short-term and long-term memory. So even though it's been over 3 years, sometimes it feels like yesterday. I think as far as some of the trauma, the laying on the floor trying to crawl my way to the door, that was super traumatic. Like from the moment I woke up with the stroke until I lost consciousness, I actually had to do a bunch of therapy to try and not live in like PTSD from that. And so I think a lot of that is done. And I don't have, that fight or flight thing when that is going, like when I think of it. But I think, I think I probably will always struggle trying to fit in this human body, especially now that it doesn't work like I want it to. And I also think, grief is a process. And, yes, grief usually is focused on dying people. We miss them and that sort of stuff. But having a huge brain injury, and having so many deficits, I will grieve who I was for the rest of my life. And say, some days it's really easy and I am just grateful and thankful and I'm glad I'm not that person anymore. And other days, when I think of things I can't do and will never be able to do, I'm angry or I'm sad or I'm living in denial, whatever that the grief process is in that moment. I think that, grief doesn't get easier, it gets lighter. So it doesn't weigh me down like it used to, but sometimes I just feel sad or I feel angry or regretful or, I look at my kids and think, having a brain injured mom's probably not super fun. I don't do a lot of the things I used to, so I think it's a lifelong process, and I would 100% be lying to myself if I said, "Oh no, everything's good now." I look normal. People wouldn't know I had a stroke unless they talked to me at nighttime, or tried to live with me or anything like that. You can't tell looking at me that I can't feel any of the right side of my body and that I have no ability. I can mirror this side, but I can't. There's so much I can't do. So I think the healing and the acceptance piece of it will be the rest of my life.
And in regards to your book, I haven't personally read the book
Yeah.
yet. I'm going to now. This has been really fascinating. I wanted to put that on the back burner until we spoke. But tell me how the book ties in with this and like how the book relates to your story and what is shared in the book.
So my guides, when I was on the other side, said, these are all the things you're going to do. And they told me I would write 3 books. And I was like, how the heck? I'm not an author. What are you talking about? And they were right. Somebody contacted me because I wanted to write, but I can't type anymore. And I struggle putting thoughts, like stringing them together kind of and processing. Anyways, she was like an angel in disguise and she typed while I talked. And so I want to say right at the 18-month mark is when we sort of contacted each other and started. And I just talked while she wrote. And so the book is a tiny bit of my life before, but that's just the introduction. And then the stroke, the NDE, and then the whole second half is just lessons from my guides that I've learned and stuff like that. And then each chapter starts with a poem that I wrote. But then the other thing, I don't think you probably know this, but like a year after the stroke, my guide said, like, you need to paint. And I was like, what? Why? Never painted I'm not artistic, just like I'm not an author. But they said, can you just do it? Just try to paint what you saw on the other side. And I thought they were nuts, but I was like, okay. I haven't painted in a bit, but I'm just going to grab something because it's right here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see it.
And I picked up like a paintbrush. These are all like, a while ago, but like I just started painting.
Oh,
And
wow.
I tried to paint like all the flowers on the other side. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be, because it's hard to like put it sort of into perspective when I don't know, it's not here, right? So
Yeah.
I just
Wow.
started painting. So that plus the books are talents, even though I'm very brain injured, that came out of going to the other side and having a stroke. And then where is it? I just saw it. This,
That is super cool.
if anybody doesn't think that I've had a stroke, this is my brain. So this is the first stroke, that really big one. And because I just grabbed this from a video, I tried to get the second stroke, which is here, but the first
Wow.
one goes all the way through the brain. The second one, they were able to stop that one from spreading anymore. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And the fact that even though your spiritual abilities and talents had come online at that point, the stroke, it's opened up even different avenues for you in the creative sense with the painting and just the creation of a book.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable and really inspiring, because I often get the sense that people perceive injuries or traumatic events like this as something that's going to hold you back or prevent you from living your life or prevent you from achieving the things that you want to achieve in your life. And in your case, that was the catalyst for you to be able to create this book that people are reading and that are touching people's lives. And you get to come and share the story with myself and the audience, the people who listen to this. And I'm super grateful for that, and just am inspired and in awe of how you're able to turn a really challenging situation, to say the least, into something that's inspiring and that people can look at and that can help people in their own challenging experiences.
Well, and I think we all could sort of take a page from my guide's book of trust your gut. Like you might not think you'd be good at something or be able to do something. And if you were going to ask me how to write a book and I would have no idea. It was step by step. But because I was trusting that this was meant to be, the right people were put in my path at the exact right times, and they helped me moving forward. And I think that you could say that for anyone. There's nothing off the table if it's something you're drawn to or you want to do, or sometimes you don't want to do it, but you feel inspired to do it. I think it's nerve-wracking. If you asked me 10 years ago, what would you be doing in 10 years? I never would have guessed this. I worked in like a medical detox for drugs and alcohol, a homeless outreach team. Like I never would have thought that this would be my life. And even though it's not perfect, and, I could say a bunch of stuff that I would love to achieve one day, more physically and getting better kind of thing, it is perfect in its imperfection. And I think we're so judgy of ourselves, and there's always the next thing we need to be doing. And sometimes the next thing is just realizing that just by existing, just by waking up and breathing every day, you're doing what you're sent here to do. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
I love that. And that's something that I try to remind myself every morning, like whatever happens today, it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
God doesn't make mistakes. I'm exactly where I need to be. Today is going to be an awesome day. Like I try very hard to start my day that way. And it's on a random Instagram reel last year, about a year and a half ago, I saw this thing and this guy said, one of the best practices you can do is to go to bed thinking about the things that you're grateful for.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Why not? I'll give it a try. And I'm not kidding. That changed my life. I started having this gratitude practice, like going to sleep. As I'm falling asleep, as I feel myself start to drift, start to think of the things that I'm grateful for and how great today was and how great tomorrow is going to be. And wouldn't you know it, more oftentimes than not, I wake up in the morning and those same thoughts are still kind of percolating.
Yeah.
And that's how my day starts. And just this simple little practice of like, yeah, it's imperfect, but it's perfect. It's exactly the way it's supposed to be. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Like that very simple practice has changed, like literally changed my life. It's one of the most impactful things that I've ever incorporated into my daily practice. And I've tried a lot of different modalities, a lot of different things, but what you said there is just acknowledging and accepting the imperfection in every moment and just saying, no, this is great. This is what I'm supposed to be experiencing right now.
And it's strange, but I have the exact same process every single night. I used to call it praying when I was religious. Now it's my gratitude meditation. Same thing, right? When I'm just about to fall asleep, especially if I've had an anxious day, I start listing all the things I'm grateful for. And sometimes, honestly, I'm grateful that I have the ability to be frustrated, that today wasn't exactly how I wanted it to be. And I'm grateful that I know tomorrow won't be the same because it's a different day. So even if the gratitude is like kind of positive, but also a little bit negative because maybe my day wasn't great, I constantly express gratitude. Anytime I sit down with my guides to do any type of spiritual work, I have a gratitude sort of mantra that I have every single time, because even though my life is not perfect, I can't pretend that it is. I'm so grateful that I can even recognize that, because there was a timeline where I wouldn't have survived. And every moment I'm here is a moment I wouldn't have had. So even if my day sucked, or I am sick, or I'm whatever it is, I'm grateful that I get to experience it and that we get to come here and do this human thing in all its chaos, and sometimes recognize that it's amazing that we're even here.
I've had experiences, different plant medicine, different things, meditation, where you get to touch the other side and it kind of sparks that remembrance again. It's like, wow, that's such an amazing, like just that the energy of that place, it's so amazing.
Yeah.
And here where I am right now is where I get to learn. It's like going to the gym, and in remembering past lives, it's like, okay, this isn't the first time. This is not the last time. It's a continuous cycle. We're always learning and growing, and this is an incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes, there are challenges, and yes, sometimes we may not feel like we want to be here. And if you don't do the homework now, you're going to have to do it later. Yeah. Like the lessons are going to have to get learned. Yeah. I respect everybody's decision to do what they will and what they want with their lives 100%, completely and totally. And wherever you go, there you are. And you can do it now, you can do it later, but the lessons that our soul is supposed to learn, we will learn in one way or another.
Yeah.
And I believe that is a fundamental part of just spirit. There's an impulse in spirit to grow and learn. Yeah. And if you're not doing that, if you're not growing and learning and evolving in some way, you're kind of pushing against an evolutionary impulse of spirit, God, source itself. Is the universe is in a constant state of expansion, and if you're not as well, you're out of flow. You're not in alignment. So, as we start to wind this down, I'm curious if you have anything you'd like to add to that, and how you would like to wrap this conversation up, I'll give you the microphone at the very end and let you, yeah, bring us home.
So I agree about lessons. And when I work, I often say I don't do yes or no kind of, I call them cheater questions. Because if I give you the answers to a lesson you're supposed to be learning, not only will you not learn it this time, the next time when it comes around, because it will, it doesn't go away, it probably will be more difficult. So I think recognizing that you don't always get every answer all of the time. Spirit gives us what we need, not what we want. And going to somebody or seeking out someone that will give you answers to a test in order to not get them yourself is not helpful for you and actually makes it a little bit harder. You need to be at the place where rather than a yes or no answer, will I get this job? Will I not? What would I learn if I did get this job? What would I learn if I didn't? And wrap your head around the lessons that you're working on to figure it out. You don't need people like me. Nobody needs people like me. And that's not great for my job, but it's true. We all have the innate ability inside of ourselves to connect with our higher self, connect with our purpose, and answer our own questions. Yes, it's fun sometimes to go to somebody to get that encouragement or that sort of push in the right direction, but you don't need me. You don't need, that psychic or this spiritual guru or this way of living. Do it if it's going to sort of fill up your cup and make your soul happy, but you have the ability within yourself to know exactly how to live this life and exactly how to be human. And the opportunities for learning will never stop. You will be learning joyfully, but sometimes very difficultly for the rest of your life. So identify the lessons. And it doesn't mean you don't have to do them right now, but if you're going through a really hard time and you start to continuously come up against, I call it like a hamster wheel, like you're doing the same thing. Maybe you're getting in the same relationship or attracting the same type of person into your life, or maybe you work with like kind of narcissistic people, but you switch jobs and then there's another narcissistic person, and like you constantly come up against this same sort of theme. Kind of take it apart a little bit. Okay, maybe it's not actually the same lesson, but you are stronger now to look at a different layer of that lesson. So maybe last time, yes, you set a boundary and whatever, but actually you went out of the situation feeling very hurt. It made you question yourself. Maybe this time you're not going to do that. You're going to set that boundary and you're going to go away guilt-free, regret-free, and you're ready for that. You're ready to learn. It's like you're starting in high school and you want to work your way up to college. But to do that, you have to do a lot of the same things over and over again. So be patient with yourself and try not to feel overwhelmed with the fact that as humankind, as a human being, you are learning all of the time. You are never failing. You're never doing it wrong. That's not a thing. There's no reward, punishment. There's no right or wrong path. Whatever path you're on, as long as you are breathing, you are learning exactly what you're supposed to be learning.
Thank you so much for saying that. Hearing that come from you, somebody who does this sort of work, that's something that I truly and deeply believe, that we all have the answers inside of us. And
Yeah.
yes, sometimes it's nice to get an outside perspective or a little nudge or a little hint to one thing or another. But ultimately, it all comes from within us, and we all have access, a direct access to source. And hearing you say that is very inspiring, and it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And like nobody has to go outside. Nobody has to go looking for sensationalist, like dramatic, channeled messages from anywhere. Like if that entertains you, if you like that, cool. And you don't have to do that. Like we all have the ability to connect with source directly and receive the information and guidance we need. Wonderfully said.
Yeah.
So Amber, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, to see your work, and to connect with you?
So I am on most of the social medias. Facebook, I'm old, so I do most of my live videos on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but I never post. People there tend to be super mean, so I stopped posting there over a year ago. Um, so my like business name or my professional name is West Coast Medium. Um, I'm in Canada. When I applied for that name, I didn't know there was also a West Coast Medium in California. So her name is Vicky. That is not me. I am Amber, and I live in Canada. So online, or if for my book, it's on Amazon, but it's also, I think, in most bookstores. I self-published, so it's a kind of weird workaround. Bookstores can buy it from Amazon, kind of thing. So yeah, it's West Coast Medium. Um, Again, I am not tech savvy, so I have my website is awful. I have not made a new one, and I know I need to. So my website you can't contact me on, but you can through social media or my email, which is both on both my social medias.
Oh, thank you. And what is the name of your book? I don't
It
think we ever
is, oh
said that.
yeah, it's called At the Stroke of Eternity, a play on the painting and the stroke.
At the Stroke of Eternity.
Yes,
That's brilliant.
and that's me.
Lovely.
This is in
Oh,
the island I live on. Yeah, all the ferns and whatnot. And it's written for people with brain injuries or things like ADHD. I have a hard time reading books now because everything's so squished. So I 1.5 spaced it so that somebody with a brain injury can actually read it. And I like pictures, so it's got pictures, which costs twice the amount to print the book, which is a pain in the butt because I have to pay that. But I don't know. I like pictures. That's the first time I walked. Like that's
wow.
exciting, right? So
Yeah. No, it's you. I really appreciate that.
yeah. And there's some of my paintings in there as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Super cool. Amber, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know a lot of people are going to find a lot of value from this conversation and inspiration in what you've shared. Thank you again. And
Yes.
yeah, everybody out there, check out Amber at West Coast Medium. I actually found out about her on Instagram from her lives, and they're really interesting. They're fun to watch. So yeah, connect with her in that way. And again, Amber, thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you for having me.